Thank you. Please remember to speak into your mic. Manaya,
Present.
Jackson,
Present.
Articelli,
Present.
Long, District 6,
Here.
Michaels,
Present.
absent, excused, Soto, Hoagland.
Great, thank you. And thank you all for joining this special meeting. So we're going to move forward with a request for approval of the City of Cape Coral Oasis Charter Schools 2023-2024 mental health application. Did you want to share?
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Board, for coming back. Jackie Collins, Superintendent. Let me offer my apologies because I left this off of the agenda on Tuesday. I was telling Dr. Manaya, I don't know how, because we've been talking about this document for months, but it happened. So here we are. I would like to present the plan to you and get your approval. This is the Mental Health Assistance Application Plan. It encompasses two different sections or two different programs. The first program is the Youth Mental Health Awareness Training Plan, and the second is the Mental Health Assistance Allocation Plan. The training plan basically is training for school personnel to help identify and understand signs of emotional distress, mental illness, substance abuse. The training plan is a requirement of the District of Lee County as far as accountability is concerned. So that plan we're not going to talk about today because that part of the document they ask us not to fill out, and that is how many staff have been trained, what was the program that was used, which is something that we'll talk about in just a second. So we're not going to talk about that part today. What we are going to talk about is the part two, the Mental Health Assistance Allocation Plan, which really establishes and expands school-based mental health care, educational training for staff in how to respond to mental health issues. So the two components, one is just simply awareness training for what the problems are. What we're going to talk about today is how we're going to respond. Okay. We are required, as is the district, to assure certain things happen in implementing this plan. The first is that 100% of the state funds that we receive are used for mental health issues, for training educators, and detecting and responding to mental health issues. We also have to have a tracking system in place, which allows us to track internally and externally how many referrals we make to our counselor, social worker, and then externally to outside local community agencies that we contract with. And we do. We're also held accountable to certain timelines. For example, students that are referred for a mental health screening have to be assessed within 15 days. And within 30 days, if there's a mental health outside contractor that has to be initiated, there's a 30-day time frame / window for that to happen as well. We also have to agree that we have a school resource officer that's been trained in mental health crisis intervention training, which is basically de-escalation tactics, and we do have those at all 4 schools. And that if a law enforcement personnel has to be involved in the assessment of a child, and I'm talking for critical incidents like Baker acting, that we go through a chain of command to make sure that we've made a reasonable attempt to contact a mental health professional before we get to the point where we are Baker acting children. Okay, we also have to guarantee that we're using evidence-based programs in our approach to responding to mental health. We use components of the blue menu of evidence-based psychosocial interventions for youth. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly talk about the plan. The first part is going to talk about and address training. We are responsible to pay to have our staff trained. And there's a program that's specified by the state of Florida. It's called Youth Mental Health First Aid Training. We've had a real hard time getting our staff trained for a variety of reasons, lack of trainers, lack of training the trainers. And now the governor has pulled the curriculum to make adjustments to the curriculum. So there is no curriculum provided. So we have to wait until the new curriculum comes out, and we're thinking that October 16th will be our first available date to get our staff trained. And that's in identifying these emotional issues and how to interact with our students on their behalf. But in the meanwhile, and in recent years, we've done Cognito at-risk modules and suicide risk training for our staff. So our anticipation is that by the end of the school year, we have 100% of our staff, or very close to it, trained in this youth mental health first aid training. We have different types of training for our threat assessment teams, including our counselors and our social workers. They're trained in threat assessment, suicide assessment training. And everybody on the threat assessment team goes through this training every year. It's provided by the district. So on our threat assessment team, we have teachers, principals, resource officers, counselors, and so forth. So a good amount of our staff is trained in this training as well. Our goal for this training, like I said, for our staff is to have 100% trained by the end of the school year. And also our goal in threat assessment training is to reduce the number of Baker Acts by 50%. I think last year we had 5. So if we could reduce that in half, that'd be ideal. It's very hard to predict those types of percentages in reducing, but that's our goal. And I think when it was all said and done last year, our social worker is here, Tiffany Corbin. Tiffany, can you raise your hand? Identify yourself. We had about 50 referrals outside of our system to our contracted social worker and or the mobile crisis team that comes to each school. Okay, so the implementation of these evidence-based programs, we have individual counseling with the students at the school level. We have certified school counselors or a school social worker and a contracted psychologist who provides behavioral therapy and supportive listening. The counselors serve as the first means of intervention and identification of mental health assistance. So either a student can go to a counselor directly and make an appointment, or a teacher can make a referral. They will then, if they don't do the assessment themselves, they'll get our social worker, Tiffany, to do the required assessments and any further assessment that the student might need. Her job is to develop a case plan that defines the nature of and frequency of the counseling, the length of the time for the sessions to take place, and the goal of the treatment. Counselors will work with them on individual needs, and sessions will be determined depending on need as well. Some only need a couple sessions to get through the crisis that they're going through. Some need sessions for the majority of the year. Some need outside counseling sessions. So that's when we would refer to an outside contracted psychologist if the situation was more than the counselor or the guidance or the social worker could handle, and they needed a more intensive plan. And in that case, our contracted psychologist would develop the plan and keep the social worker and counselor updated on the progression through the plan. In addition to that, we also have implementation of school curriculums that instruct students in stress management, self-monitoring behaviors, high-risk behaviors, mental health awareness for self and others. And students are also trained in self-reporting and the reporting of others of concern to the appropriate personnel. We use, at the elementary level, a curriculum called Second Step. We only use the resiliency component of that curriculum. The governor has pulled some other components of that curriculum. And then at the secondary level, we use something called Suite 360. And all students are served in our system by these in-school curriculums. So the goal of the in-school curriculum components is to reduce the number of school counselor and social worker student referrals by 10%. And once again, it's hard to predict, just depends on the year and the situation that's happening at the time. But our goal is to reduce those referrals with this ingrained curriculum knowledge that they're learning. And also to reduce the number of referrals to our contracted psychologist by 10%, from 15 referrals last year to 13 this upcoming school year. And that's pretty much how we do it. They ask us in this plan to identify our student to district staff ratios. We have 4 school counselors. The ratio is 1 for every 800 students. We have 1 social worker, so of course the ratio is 1 to 3,300 students. School psychologist is provided by the school district. Every building has one. And then we have an outside licensed mental health provider, which is Southwest Psychological Services. And like I said, if I didn't already say it, our school counselors and social workers are available, social worker 24/7 during the course of the school day. They can electronically schedule an appointment. They have a QVS, what's it called outside your office? QR code. They can schedule something immediately or for the next day. And they're always available to service our students, which is wonderful. They're not pulled in any other direction on occasion when they have a meeting, but that is what their goals are. Our allocation for mental health services is $168,602. We don't have any unexpended allocation funds left over from previous years that roll. We spend $160,602 on services provided by our staff, so those are staff costs. $4,000 are for collaborative partnerships with the community. That would be our contractor. And another $4,000 are for leadership curriculum renewals, training costs that we will have when we get our staff trained and we're in compliance. So that totals $168,602. I also included in the backup materials the expenditure report that each school has to submit, and it'll show you the portion of their allocation that goes towards their counselor, the social worker, and it's about $1,000 for development and training and $1,000 for our contracted psychologist. Each allocation is about roughly $43,000, $45,000, $39,000, $40,000 per school. So that is how we respond, and we spend our mental health allocation for the 2023-24 school year. And if I can answer any questions of the board, I'd be happy to do so.
Questions?
I was a little confused. You said that we're trying to reduce the referrals?
We're always trying to reduce the number of referrals by providing, you mean counselor referrals? Is that what you're? By providing curricular needs, cultures in the classroom. Some of our schools do PBIS, which is more of an equity and a cultural-based proactive support that we're seeing from teachers in the school, gives rewards for good behavior. So yes, all those things combined, we're hoping will reduce the number of mental illness needs. We have reduced our mental health illness needs, I would say, over the course of the last couple of years. They have gone down. Am I right about that, Tiffany, would you say? Can you speak to that at all? I'm putting her on the spot.
Are we saying that we're going to be reducing their needs for the referrals because we're going to be handling it more in-house or before it gets to a point of a referral? Is that what we're saying?
Exactly. So the goal with the training of the staff and then the curriculum that we have for the students is that we can better help them to handle things in our system, in the schools, and then hopefully be able to provide, resources sooner than before they would get to the extreme of not having the help that they need, not having the coping skills, the resiliency training, to where they get to the point where they're needing that outside mental health resource. So we're trying to keep it more in-house and being able to help them, on an individual level before, it gets a little too extreme.
We're hoping with these curricular elements, they can work themselves through it. If they can't, they can always go to a counselor, but the goal is to give them the tools that they need in order to be able to be productive in the classroom environment.
I did have a second part of the question too with the Baker Act. The protocol is that we want to, before they're actually Baker Acted, we're trying to intervene, a mediator or a mediary between those.
Yeah. Can you just,
Who is that?
can you talk about the Baker Act process, the steps you have to go through before that process actually occurs?
Yeah, so typically in those situations, a Baker Act situation, a student is referred to us. It could be from a fellow student who had a concern for the individual, a teacher, or they come up to us themselves. They express that they have thoughts of hurting themselves or hurting someone else. So then they'll come. I will meet with them. If the team is available, we'll meet together. We have an assessment that we do called the Columbia Scale, and we'll go through a list of questions. And then if they answer yes to a majority of the questions, then I reach out to the mobile crisis team. The mobile crisis team comes, and they basically do a second evaluation of what I just did. So it's just a second process of seeing if this is what's in the best interest for the student. And then if they're on the same page still, then they call a supervisor. And that supervisor makes the ultimate decision. And then if they say yes, they need Baker acted, that's when Cape Coral PD gets involved and helps us with that.
So it sounds like we have quite a few layers.
Yes, absolutely.
Other questions?
Yes, just a real quick follow-up question. As you're going through the process, at any point, do they contact the parents when there's a concern about a potential Baker Act?
Absolutely. As soon as I'm done with the student and I've done the assessment, I first contact the mobile crisis team, and then once they're contacted, the parents get contacted. One, so they can get to the school, but two, they're part of the process as well. The mobile crisis team will speak with the parents and kind of try to get some home information, see if they're involved in anything outside of school. That would give them more information in making the decision as well.
All right, thank you. And I just had one follow-up thing. In the event that a student has needs and you guys have to refer, is there any additional cost to the family once you guys have to refer them for some additional counseling? If it appears that it's not something that you're going to be able to handle in the normal course with them?
So we do have our contractor, our psychologist that will come in and we foot that bill so that the individual can get, depending on the situation, we may set it to 2 or 3 sessions with him, sometimes a little more, but basically kind of just like a bridge until the parents can get them the resources that they need outside of the school.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just the first question is real general. Of the 5 instances of the Baker Act, do we happen to know or have the data that, are any of those repeated individuals or?
So 1 was repeated, yes.
Okay, so 4, I guess, unique.
But those are, so technically it would have been 6, but 1
Oh,
was
okay.
someone
Well,
twice.
so it's that went in the opposite direction. Okay, so we already did that, what I was trying to do. And then the next one is the Parental Rights and Education Bill. I know has a slight mental component. Am I correct in assuming that would have been contemplated in the drafting of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
The parents are allowed to opt out of any kind of mental health, am I right about this curriculum?
Correct.
Even the resiliency component, if they so opt to do that.
Okay, just want to make sure that we,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Questions? So, given the pandemic, the hurricane, and we had 5 Baker Acts last school year, do we have what it was the year before? Like, did we go up, down? Do you know?
We went up from the previous year.
By a lot?
No, not by a lot.
Not by a lot?
More, and the Baker Acts, not so much, but contacting the mobile crisis team. Every time we contact the mobile crisis team, it does not mean they're Baker acted. A lot of times, it's just another layer of support. It's very hard for parents to get counseling set up for their child because the system is full. And so the mobile crisis team will also just help set up kind of like a safety plan and help with getting them services quicker.
And I was part of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team for Lee County School District a few years ago. And is best practice for counselors, is it 1 to 800? Is that, do we know? Because I recall they presented 1 to 400, but I thought that might have been social workers. So, do you know best practice?
I don't know that. You know, we tried to hire an extra social worker with the ESSER 3 funding that we received, and we posted it. We couldn't get anybody to respond. It's very hard to find counselors and harder to find social workers. So that was on our radar to have another person work with us, but there was nobody available.
And do we still have that role as an open role, as a funded open role, or we eliminated that from the budget?
We did not include it in the budget this year for this.
Okay, but we're not finding any, I'm sure the Lee County School District, in a different set of circumstances than what we face. Are we comfortable with our ratio?
I say between all 4 schools, I think we work together as a team the best that we can. If, there's an area where it's maybe slacking a little bit and someone has a little more downtime, we go and we help out. We are pretty busy, but like I said, I think we work very well together as a team and get everything taken care of that needs to.
All right, so with Resilient Lee, right, one of the big issues is mental health for K-12. There's a number of initiatives and projects that are being defined. I'd probably just like to ensure that we're tracking our data in a way that if we feel we're going to need more resources, I think those resources are going to be available for us by next year. The funding for that will be available for us next year. But if we don't have the data to show, here's why we think we need 2 more, then it might be a little more challenging. So, but there's some nice funding that's coming our way over the next year or so.
That's great.
That's good to know. And Tiffany we do keep very detailed records of tracking every incident. We have to report our numbers to the district at the end of the year, who reports it to FLDOE.
Great. Anything else before
I don't think so.
someone makes a motion? Someone like to?
We're motioning to be able to submit the application. Is that what
To
we're-
approve the
To approve the
mental health
application.
application.
Approve the application.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Great. Anything else before we, I was, just a quick note, I was at a meeting last night and the superintendent from Lee County Schools was there. And we had an OASIS parent as well. And he brought up that through their virtual school, they're able to offer Mandarin as an example. And that any student throughout the district that's attending a regular school can sign up for Mandarin through the virtual school, right? And then the parent asked, well, since we're part of, generally part of the Lee County, do we have access to the virtual school, right? I'm pretty sure we don't, right?
We can,
Yeah.
we do, but that is our FTE funding that we get per pupil goes to the virtual school.
Okay. Even if it's just for one class? Okay, unless we become our own virtual kind of a charter school. Okay, great. All right, anything else before we adjourn?
A side note on that,
Sure.
I think with sports, we're allowed to utilize Lee County School sports if we don't offer the sport, is that correct?
That's true, that's new legislation, yes, and I believe that's true. That's I don't know if there's a cost associated with that, actually.
I wasn't positive, but I know we are able to utilize, if we don't offer a specific sport or activity, one of our students can go utilize that at the Lee County School District.
That's interesting.
They can't deny it, as far as I know.
Great. Okay. Adjourned?
Date and time of the next meeting?
Oh, date and time, see. So the date of our next meeting is, hold on a second, I have to get all the way back to the front. This is the part that I always forget to say. The next regular governing board meeting will be on Tuesday, September 12th at 5:30 p.m. at Oasis Elementary North in the cafeteria.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Meeting adjourned. I think I forget that 9 times.